There's still a few, you can come through there too. There's still some rough edges around, but. So, yeah, down here, my gosh, there was a go-kart ramp, and there was a thing that went up, kind of on the wall, and then down over there, and then the guy was a single dad, and he did some cool things for his two sons, and one of them was this go-kart track he built down here for them. Anyways, let's see.
So John, as far as the cleanup goes, right over there, that wall, that shotcrete wall, that was the biggest holdout.
The gunite, yeah.
That had to be coated multiple times. So you look and you see this white primer everywhere. That's essentially Kills. It's an oil-based primer, and they soaked this thing to death multiple times. But there was the same stone that you see on the outside was essentially used for that foundation as well. And sandstone, pretty porous, really loves to just absorb that meth vapor, and it just hangs out for it. And you're never going to clean stone, right? That's just going to spall forever. So the easiest thing to do is just to encapsulate it. But even that was a little bit tricky, and took a couple of applications before it passed.
Yeah. And it's what they use on a swimming pool. It's gunite, and so.
You'll see that on the side of the road too sometimes. And you've got sloughing slopes that they're looking for an easy fix.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk about other aspects of the cleanup? Like, what does it mean in
Well,
the physical work to clean this up?
Sure. And I mean, and I can, I started out in environmental consulting, so I've done all kinds of cleanups from yanking petroleum tanks and doing soil and groundwater and vapor cleanups. I've done PCB abatements, pesticide abatements, all kinds of things. Heavy metals, mine site cleanups, landfill cleanups, basically everything except for rad waste. I don't go near ionizing radiation. There's enough of it around. I don't need to expose myself to any more. And I get some when I fly too, and that's not great. Anyway, so cleaning up the meth, frankly, the best way to clean up meth is to either knock the building down or gut it. Anything that's porous is going to have meth. You can do surface level cleaning of meth. There's a variety of ways to do that. It's not particularly effective. It is if there hasn't been a lot of chronic use of meth or cooking of meth in the area. But as soon as you get to a point where you've been cooking meth, you're chronically using meth a lot, you're saturating these materials. The ingredients in meth, some of them do have half-lives that are a little bit longer, and they're somewhat mobile. So they'll impregnate something that's porous, for instance, drywall or studs. You go in, you'll do a surface cleaning, you can go back and do a sample, and it'll be fine. And you'll go back like a month later and do a sample, and you're over the standard again, because it's just leached right back out again. Cigarette smoke does essentially the same thing too. So if you ever have a rental or you're moving into a place where there were smokers, and you go and you're like, oh, I'm just going to put some primer up. And then all of a sudden you start, seeing some brownish type things making its way through. Yeah, that's the tobacco coming back out of the wall again. Meth does the same thing. So it's very challenging. So carpets, drywall, all that stuff, you just got to rip it out. I actually did a meth abatement in a house that I bought and lived in. And I took it down to the studs, and then I put a vapor barrier up. So meth cleanups are horrible. At the same time, I would be remiss in not stating the fact that aside from the one hot spot up there, the one with the $60,000 or 60,000 range meth hits, the toxicologist for health and welfare at the time said, yeah, if you went around and licked the walls all day, you might get a therapeutic dose of meth. That was the word I was searching for the other day, therapeutic. Yeah, you might get a therapeutic dose of meth. So, like drinking a cup of coffee, that's considered therapeutic. Nevertheless, it was above the standard, so we utilized that. And sometimes when you do these projects, you run across things where you're like, well, is that legit? Maybe, but if the law says I can do it, and I'm within that regulatory framework, let's get it done. And so that's what we did. Now, if there was a heating oil tank over there, it's either that room or that room, and let's say that thing had released, if there had been a release of heating oil, now you've got a sub-slab problem. That's going to volatilize. Those vapors are going to come into this indoor airspace, and they're actually going to concentrate. And if you got kids in here, that's not so great. They're going to be breathing in PAHs, VOCs that they necessarily shouldn't be subjected to. So that could have been a problem. What we would have done in a situation like that is drill in a dry well, pack it full of gravel, put perforated pipe in it, and then pipe that to the outside, put a vacuum on it, just put a blower on it, and then just suck vapor through the soil. It's much like a radon system. Any of you guys have radon systems in your homes? If you live in the north end, you might want to test your... Anyway, just saying.
Yeah.
I put one in. They're pretty easy. So something like that might have occurred. We may have come in and dug out a bunch of soil and then done the same thing either way. But we lucked out. We didn't have that type of contamination to deal with. A lot of times you are dealing with actual releases and they go underneath buildings and things like that and make it pretty complicated. So then you have to decide, do you knock it down? Do you keep it in place? And do you actually remediate it, or do you create positive pressure and push it out so that vapors can't, come into the building and intrude that way? But, as far as the cleanup went, it
Here's
was
one of those squares, by the way, Aaron.
yeah, you're right. There it is. Yeah. So there you can see this frame. So you put these frame up, and again, there were dozens of these things throughout. And then you come in with a wipe, and you wipe it, and then you fold it, and then you fold it again, and then you put it in a bag, and then you write a little sample label, and then you put that on your chain of custody, and you throw that in a cooler with all the other hundreds of samples you're taking. You take it to a lab, and you get the results back, and it's like, oh, A17. Okay, this is A17. You go here. This is hot. I don't know that this is hot. It's certainly not now. This could be, though. Again, I could lick that all day and nothing would happen to me. I could go over to Java and get a better stimulant. So,
And then they wash everything with an oxidized bleach,
yeah.
remove everything they can, which then those two levels in there and all the framework, all contaminated.
Yeah.
They can't remove those two levels without structurally bracing it. Otherwise, it would fall down. So all those burgundy metal girders and pillars, they put in, and they had the huge crane drill a hole for the pillars, brought them all the way down. Here they are. Cut, dug out footings, supported the girders. They had to cut a hole in that side of the building, bring them in, lay them on the top floor, but in order to do that, they were so heavy that they had to shore up temporarily the floors underneath, only to, once they got everything in place, then remove everything. With that sagging roof, they were able to shore it up a little bit, but not straight because it had sagged and like it would have broken the timbers. And then after everything's so in some ways, it accomplished what we were wanting to do, open that space up anyways, through this program, and get the abatement done as well, but it was wrapped into the program.
Well, and getting back to the community side too, right? Nobody wants to send their kids to a meth and lead contaminated facility to, get art lessons and dance lessons, right? I mean, I had kids that were of the age and they went through some TRICA programs, not here obviously, and I was like, well, yeah, obviously I wouldn't want my kids going, even though I knew, empirically that they couldn't get damaged, but still, it's a public relations thing. So now, this is probably one of the cleanest buildings from an environmental perspective in the North End, right? Because all the other houses here have lead paint in the trim for sure, probably some asbestos tape here and there, and some other nasty stuff, asbestos in the masking of whatever laminate flooring they might have that was laid down in the 50s through the 70s. So this is a safe space to bring your kid, chemically speaking. They're not going to get exposed to anything. So that's important. And
that was really advantageous for us because it gave us that stamp of EPA, IDEQ, it's been remediated, like there's an actual sort of a legal stamp on it's safe now, it's clean. So it gave us the reassurance that we could be above reproach going forward and turning a church turned meth lab into children's art center safely again. And I wanted to kind of share a little bit about some of the collaborative programs. In some ways, kind of, they had to work against each other, like with the state historic preservation. I remember they came in and they said, well, everything's been removed already except these stained glass windows are kind of the one thing left.
Oh, the rolling ceiling.
And that rolling ceiling
Yeah.
that is
It was cut in
now gone. But I mean, you've got planning and zoning, you've got historic design review, you've got the EPA, you've got the State Historic Preservation Office, you've got safety issues, you've got and they're not always in sync. The program was saying, let's remove this ceiling because it's contaminated. The State Historic Preservation Office saying, remediate around that ceiling. So we did it. And we
Which
went
you didn't
up-
have to do, by the way. So here's the thing with Section 106. It can gum things up, but it can't stop it. So the National Historic Preservation Act can make things more challenging. But when you're dealing with privately held property, they can't come in and say, you can't do this. There are hoops you need to jump through. They may or may not try to sue you. Here they wouldn't. They don't have the resources. But they can gum you up. And the reason that Jon and TRICA did these things is A, goodwill, B, they wanted to do the right thing, and C, because they were using some federal funding that was tied to Section 106 compliance, the State Historic Preservation Office knew that, and they knew that they could utilize that as leverage to get what they, as much as they could get out of Jon and TRICA. And to be fair, it was low-hanging fruit. It was an easy organization for them to beat up on and get what they wanted, because so many other people can just say, hey, why don't you get off my property and pound sand?
Interesting.
And they can do
I
that.
did not know that. That's interesting. But then that story gets even deeper, because after we finished the remediation, then we got funds to repair the roof. And so the roofers were up there and they were like, this is really wobbly. We feel like we're about to fall through. Called the structural engineers who donate, and all these people have donated in kind, architects, structure, so it's...
Even the North End.
Yes, the neighborhood association.
Yes. I was on the board at the time when we put that grant together. Yeah.
They came in, they said, you are about to fall through the roof. This has not been framed. So they said, get off the roof. Before we continue, we need to reframe that entire side over there. Meanwhile, there's this ceiling that SHPO had said keep, that's blocking. Let's go upstairs and you can see better what I'm talking about. But